So let's start the session. Good evening, everyone. Today we are doing a session on JavaScript. As you can see the logo, we have a very special guest with us. We are at session 8 for WikiClub Take Road to Wiki program. And so you all are the part of Cohort 2 and we are today at session 8. We will be talking about JavaScript, DOM manipulation and a lot of other things related to JavaScript. I know JavaScript had been your good friend, all of yours good friend in coding. You have been using JavaScript a lot. Few of them are also a React Native developers, so they can also relate with these few things. Um, we have today Debajit Mallick, who is a software engineer and he's also a organizer for React Siliguri. I think a lot of you have used React. Can we have raise of hand who have used React in your projects? Cool. A lot of people have used React in their project. We all know that path. You used to start with HTML, CSS, and then go with React and all. Cool. And call yourself as a full stack developer and a front end developer. Cool. Debajit is also a part of GDG Siliguri. So if you wanted to have any conversation related to software engineering, anything related to React, I think he's the go-to guy for you all to ask more questions related to that. That I can see some fans of React Native also. Cool. Um, Over to you, Debajit. The session is all yours. Please take over this.
Sure, Ankit. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hello. So before going to start the session, let me just share my screen. Just let me know if my screen is visible. Mm, Is my screen visible right now?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Okay, so before today's the agenda of the session is basically JavaScript, like essential for modern web development. So not like modern if you are doing old modern anything. Like if you are a web developer who want to build application for front end, JavaScript is the end thing that you need to have, right? So without it you cannot do anything. So it should be your go-to thing. Uh, and on that, what we are going to start today's session is bit of like the basics. So those who know the basics very well for them, and they will like maybe revise the things. And for those who are like very new to JavaScript, they will understand the basics. And then at the end of the session, what I am going to share is the like advanced things, like what in industry you need to know. Let's say tomorrow you get a job, and after that, what are the things you're going to deal with in JavaScript? And then we are going to have the Q&A. So, like Ankit already gave an intro of myself. So currently, I'm working at a company called Argion. It's a US-based company, like US-based startup. And then there I work as a full stack developer, like mostly front end and also back end as well. And I am the organizer of Judicial Liguri and the React Liguri as well. So for React devs, if you have any question, I can also address that at the end also. So the whole agenda of the session is first we are going to discuss about the core JavaScript, and then the DOM manipulation, then the asynchronous JavaScript, and then the best practices. Okay. So let's get started. So look, first of all, like what is JavaScript? So uh, at short, here I have written that it's a language of web, right? That is what I tell at the start. If you are someone who want to build application for web, JavaScript is the end answer. You don't, you can build with other things as well, but the thing is, end of the day, all of them are compiled into JavaScript. So that doesn't matter whatever things you are going to develop. End of the day, it will be compiled into JavaScript. The reason is the browser that you are using to show everything in the browser. That browser only understand HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So it doesn't matter if you write application in React, Vue, or Angular. End of the day, everything comes into JavaScript only. So it's a dynamic, high-level scripting language that power the interactivity of the web from simple button clicks to full stack application. running on Node.js, right? So simple those like let me just take, can I get a raise of hand who know basic JavaScript, like basic simple, like JavaScript fundamentals? How many we have? Let's see. Great, great. I think we have like quite a number of people who know basic JavaScript, right? So those who know, they understand like the thing is there are two type of languages. If I give you a basic understanding, so what is like in college you guys already learn about C++, C, right? So they are like strictly type language. There you need to declare int, like float, var, like int float, things like that, right? Now the thing is there, if you declare a variable as int, you cannot like put any other value, like string into it, right? That is how those languages work. But in case of JavaScript, JavaScript doesn't have those type safety things. So let's say in a line you can put a variable with a value of a string, and next line you reassign that same variable with let's say a number. That doesn't matter with JavaScript. So it's a like free to, but that nature of JavaScript is a good thing also, and it's also a bad thing also. If you don't know how to handle it properly, it will create a lot of mess for you. So that is like how it works, and that is why there is a popular saying in JavaScript that it's a most loved and most hated language both as well. So some people love it, and those who don't understand it properly, they will gonna hate it really. And this is like how it runs on Node.js. Like we write a variable, we write a required statement. It I know it's a little bit hard for this second part because if you don't know JavaScript, Node is a little bit hard for it. So can I get a little bit raise of hand for those who know Node.js, basic Node.js? No? Okay, great, great. I think a good number of people know Node.js, right? Mm. So Node is basically the thing, you can run JavaScript on backend as well. You can build your own server using JavaScript, and that is what Node.js is. So I will like come to these things in later part of the session where we'll discuss like what things you can do using JavaScript. But yeah, this is like the very basic. So it's a scripting language that you can use to write code, and like it helps us to run build application for browsers primarily. Mm. Now, the next thing is variables and data types, right? Normal C, I think everyone knows, right? In college, C++, basic, any, I think everyone knows, right? Okay, great, great. Yeah. So the same like that, you need to know about variable types as well. So these are some of the primitive types in JavaScript, like string. So JavaScript has string, then we have number. So in C, you may have seen the thing as int and float, but for JavaScript, it only treats everything as a number. It doesn't have a float and int differently. It's simple number. 28 and 28.01, both are number only. And then we have booleans, right? So these three are the things which you see mostly when you write code in JavaScript. And then you have something called as reference type, which is like the objects and arrays. And there is one thing you need to always remember in JavaScript, or like in JavaScript it behaves like that. That arrays are also a type of object. So that is where the quirky nature of JavaScript comes from. So let's say JavaScript has like give you a simple example. Now this part is easy to understand, right? C, C++, everywhere we have like different type of variables and types. Uh, if you there is a function in JavaScript which is called type of. So if you give like simple example, type of and then name, it will return you string. Type of age, it will return you number. Type of is dead, it will return you a boolean. Type of user, it will return you an object. So this is an object. But the funny thing is if you write a simple array, right, and write type of for that particular array, it will return object as well. So this is some of the things that you need to understand, that in JavaScript, arrays are also object. So JavaScript doesn't have a type called array. It's also an object. Same way, if you check for type of null, right? JavaScript has a dedicated type called null, and this null also null undefined. Those are also different. Like not that same type of data type that you are thinking of. Like null means you may think, okay, why null and undefined? They both are same, right? But in JavaScript, null is a different thing, undefined is a different thing. So those are the things you need to be like very sure that you don't mess up with them directly. Then we have functions and scope. Functions are very important in JavaScript, right? So in any language, if you go, this is like a very important thing. So what is a function? Function is basically when we have encapsulate a reusable logic, right? Let's say you want to print from 1 to 30. You don't want to write it multiple times. You just write a function. You want to do a addition operation. You don't want to write it multiple times. You can just make a function of it, right? Now, this is how we normally write function. This is like, let me just go, yeah. So this is how we normally do. It's very normal in normal languages as well. So we have a function keyword, and then the name of the function, and the bracket, and then the curly braces. Then I write some condition like if and then true. Then I will print let message is equal to hi, and then console log this message. Now, what will happen is this is the like if I write if true and let message hi, this is normally how we write functions. Now, the thing is in JavaScript, we have something called as arrow function. Now, what is arrow function? You may see this syntax a lot in if you are writing JavaScript. Now, this is a different way of writing function. Why people write like this? Because the best part in JavaScript is they also treat function as variable as well. So, like to understand this, let me just give you a simple reference how JavaScript was different from other languages. Normally, what happens is in function, it's a separate full type in other languages. But in JavaScript, what happens is when JavaScript at first, when you run a simple function, right? Like when you run a simple program, on that time, JavaScript store all the things into the memory. Now, on that time, what it will do, it will scan the whole code base. It will find all the variables and store them with a primitive value called undefined. That means is it doesn't have any value. So let's say when it scans the whole file, it will say, okay, I have a variable called A, I have a variable called B, right? In the global scope, I will take them and store with them with the initial value of undefined. Once that is done, and it will take all the function and just name the function as key and put the whole function body in a value into the into the memory at first. And when after this part is done, it will go into the memory and execute them step by step. So let's say give you an example. Let's say I have a JavaScript file where I write let a is equal to 2. Now at first what it will do, it will take that a, go into the memory, put that a into the memory and initialize it with undefined. Now what will happen is once it's done, it will see that, okay, I have a let a is equal to 2. Now this a, I want to put a value of 2. It will take that 2, go into the memory, update that undefined to 2, like that. And for this type of function, when we have whole function, it will take that whole function, let's say greet, right? This is the name of the function. And that whole function body, it will put that value. And once you execute that greet function, it will go into the memory, find the definition of that function, and simply execute that. That is how the whole thing actually works. But the great part is how it's stored into the memory, that is fully different. For normal function like this, if you write like function like simply like this, here what will happen is you will have greet as a key and the whole function body as value. This is how normally will it will work. But for arrow functions, what will happen is it will treat this whole this part is a function, right? That bracket and then a and b are parameter and will return a plus b. It will at first make add is equal to undefined because JavaScript can store functions as value. So what will happen is it will treat that function as a variable. And for variables, it's very normal for JavaScript at first initialize it with undefined. And once it gets this value, a, b, and then return a plus b, it will update that thing into the memory like that. So you this is like a different way of writing functions, but like it's a very popular question in JavaScript interviews. They will ask you, okay, what's the difference between a normal function and a arrow function? Arrow, you can just tell maybe right that they are like look different. The parameters are very like small. Like you can just write a comma b. These are the parameter and return statement like a plus b. But that is not at all. This is also a thing, but the main thing is how it's stored into the memory. They are wholly different. Okay, and then we have a scope. Now, scope means is uh, you can like the simple example of this is, see here what is written that if true and then message is high, and you try to access this message outside of this bracket, right? When you try to do that, you will get a reference error. Why? Because the message variable is created inside this bracket. You cannot access it outside. If you try to access it, you will get a reference error. So this whole bracket, inside the bracket, this variable, it's a scope. You cannot access the variable out of this scope. This scope, how the scope actually work, it's different for a let and const, and for a var, like how we write JavaScript in old time using var, it's fully different. So var has more loosely coupled, so you can access. If I say declare that same variable using var message, I can easily access that outside. But for late, I cannot do that. That's the thing. Now, then we come into closure. Now, what is closure? So a closure is a function that retain access of variables from its outer scope even after the outer function has finished execution. Great for data privacy and state. Now, what is this? Like what this technical mumbo jumbo thing is all about? Let's just see the code. It will be very easy to understand then. So simple. Like I have a counter function. I created a variable called count. Right? It's a private variable. That means you cannot access this count variable outside of this function. Right? Now, what I am doing is I am returning a arrow function, and this arrow function is basically going to return plus plus count. What it means, if I run counter first time, what will happen is I'll get a value of 1, right? Because 0 at first, it's 0, and then it will be 0 plus 1. It will be 1, right? Simple. Now, the interesting thing about JavaScript is, let's say I run counter at first time, right? And whatever this return, I am basically storing that into this next variable. Now, what will happen is, what this counter will return is another function if you see properly. It's not the value actually. It's a function, right? Arrow function. Now, now that means is next is also a function, right? Now, if I execute next, what will happen? So simple, think about it simply. So counter returns another function, and this function returns count plus plus count every time. That means counter returns next, right? That means this another function. Now, when I execute this next, at first, what I will get the value of 1, right? Now, the interesting thing is when I execute next again, I will get 2. Why? You might tell, okay, but the value of count is 0, right? So how it will remember in this function that the value of count changed, right? That is the interesting thing about closure, that when you want to have like, and you may ask like, why make things so much complicated? Where you use that? There is a use. There are like most of the places we use closure, and the reason is all because of privacy. Now you may ask where. Let's say give you a simple example. There are situations, right, where you don't want to people to access the details directly, but maybe you do some changes and just want to give that access to people. What I mean is, let's say you don't want to know the actual value of count to people, but you want to just print the plus count to the console, right? This is something. And in that case, you don't want people to get the access of actual count. So now in this way, people will don't get the access of actual count variable, but whatever is you want to like show to the people, they will just see that part, but it will use the value of count as well, right? So that is some of the places where we use closure a lot. Next is wasting. This is the interesting part, and I already covered it a little bit ago. The basic concept of wasting. It's this. So wasting is basically JavaScript waste variable and function declaration to the top of their scope, and var is initialized as undefined, let and const stay in the temporal date zone until assigned. Now, what is this all mumbo jumbo thing? At first I told, right? Remember that part that JavaScript takes all the variables, stored it into a memory part where it put the value undefined in it, right? Now, why this matter a lot? Like, why this thing matter? The reason is JavaScript is the only language. If you try to do this thing now, console log A, like I want to print A in the console, and then after that I created a variable called A is equal to 5. Anyhow you will get a error in the console that trying to access a before creating that, something like that, and it will give you a full error in other languages. But the interesting thing is JavaScript give you a console of undefined. It's not an error. Now you may think why. The reason lies in the answer what I told earlier, right? So what happened is when this var a is in equal to 5, you see that after console log, right, in the code, but it doesn't matter. How JavaScript actually works is JavaScript create something called as execution context. When you run the program, it created something called execution context. And in the execution context, what it will do, it has two parts. One part is the memory part that I talked about. Another part is code execution part. In memory part, what it will do is it will take all the variable and take store them as a key value pair. And the key is the name of the variable and the value is undefined at first. So it will take all the variable like this A and everything that B, everything take that and put a value of undefined in it. And then it will take all the function, as I told earlier, right? It will put the name of the function as key and the whole function body, right? Whole inside whatever inside the bracket into the value. Now, what happened is, think about this. At first, memory part is done, right? Now, go into the code execution part. In code execution part, what will happen? It will go line by line, right? Because at first, talked about JavaScript. I told, right, JavaScript is a synchronous single-threaded language. Synchronous means step by step it will execute. Now, it will get console log A, and console log A, when it goes into the memory, find the value of A. What is the value of A right now? Undefined, right? So it will print undefined. In the next line, it will found A is equal to 5. So it will go into the memory and update the value from undefined to 5. That's why this undefined is there and it doesn't give you an error. But for late and const, they are not into the same way. So they are also actually wasted. But the thing is, they put the variable into a part where this is called a temporal dead zone. What it means is you cannot access a variable before creating it. Now, what will happen is if you try to do the same thing using a late or var const variable, it will throw you a reference error. That means you're trying to access a variable before basically uh, before declaring it. It will tell you that okay, the variable is already there, but you cannot access it right now. That is what happened when for these type of cases. Now, the ES6 essential. Now, what is ES6? First, let's understand that. ES6 is JavaScript. Normally, what happened is uh, at the time when browsers were created and JavaScript at first when it comes, right? What happened is every other browser make their own version of JavaScript, and it's pretty hard for software development farms or companies to develop websites for all the browsers, but they have different JavaScript standards. So what happened? Same way how Europe comes into every way, they come with an idea called ECMA. So they formed this body which make a convention that okay, we will launch a standard version which is called as ECMA script, and this is like how normal software updates comes up for other languages and other language updates comes same way. ES6, ES7 is basically ECMAScript 6, ECMAScript 7. This is like the JavaScript updates you can think of. Now, in JavaScript's history, ES6 and ES7 are the very major one. They are the very major update and they got like pretty good likes because they have a lot of feature. So we always, when we teach people about JavaScript, this ES6 plus is very important for us to teach them. So ES6 is launched at 2015 and beyond. Introduction, those things like destructuring, spread operator, rest operator, template literals, and default parameter essential for writing modern and readable JavaScript code. What it means, let's say I have a simple object like user, which has a name called Deb and role Deb, like that. Now, let's say I want to have the access of these keys, right? Normally, how you do that? You do user.name and user.role, right? Now, instead of a more cleaner syntax is, you can write something like const and the bracket, name and role. These two are present in the object, right? And is equal to user. What it means is I will take the value out of name and role from the user object, and then I can directly use the name and role here. So this is what is called as object destructuring. Same way, we have spread operator. Like what is like, so let's say I have a nums, right? A array 1, 2, 3. Now I want to create another array like more. And there I want to put 4 and 5, but I also want to put the value 1, 2, 3 also. Instead of putting 1, 2, 3 like this, what I can do dot 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 nums. What it means is whatever inside nums is there, just spread that value across that place. So after this, the output of more is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are some of the very interesting features that we have in ES6 Plus. There are a lot also, but I just put it some of them so that you can also go and like learn about them in the internet after this session. Then the major part where the interesting things are gonna do. Like till now, what I taught is all about the logic part. It's about language, how we can write logic, if else, and those things, the concept of JavaScript and stuff like that. But this is where you connect that whole logic engine with the UI part, right? So simple thing is, let's say I have a button, right? On click of that button, I want to fire that add function I created. Let's say user enters two number and there is a add button. I want to click it and I want to show the addition of those two number into the browser, right? How I can going to do that? That is where the DOM manipulation and those things are comes up. What is DOM? DOM is basically document object model. Now, what is document object model? Think of it like when you write HTML, it's not possible for I think for browser, right, to see the HTML and create that whole design, right? Now, what is happened inside? There is something called DOM tree. So JavaScript and like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, both of three work together, create a whole tree where we have a HTML document object, and then using JavaScript, you can have that power to manipulate that whole tree of like elements of like HTML elements. Now, what it means is, let's say I have a button, right? On click of the button, I want to fire a function. Now, to do that, at first I need to go into HTML and select that button, right? Capture the button so that I can fire a function. So there is a function called document.querySelector. Using this query selector, you can select any element. So let's say in the button, I have put an ID. Okay, the name of the ID is submit. Now, when I put I want to select that submit button. I can just write document.querySelector and then submit and this button. And now the value of that submit button is going to stored into this btn variable. Same way, like when you want to select multiple elements, there is a function called query selector all. Let's say you made a to-do list, and inside the to-do list you have items. Okay, and each item has a class called item. Now you want to select all of them. You have a dot item. You have a function called query selector all. You can use that to get all the items like to-do elements and store them into the items variable. So as you can see, here is the place where you basically connect your UI logic into the actual executable code that is happened in the browser. Same way, let's say I have a main title, right? Uh, Main title. Now I want to select that by ID. So I know that that is a ID. So I can use that get element by ID function. So document.get element by ID and the main title, I can select the title. The fastest for single elements. ID, you if you know HTML, so let me check a raise of hand. How many of you know like basic HTML, like class ID, those things? Okay, yeah, I think a good number of people know, right? Like simple class and IDs, those things, right? So let's say for ID, we know, right? ID only can be one in a whole page. If the ID cannot be duplicate, right? Class can be duplicate, ID cannot be duplicate. So in that things, it's very easy to search using this get element by ID. So query selector and get element by ID, for my experience, what I observe is get element by ID is the most used for me. Like when I develop web application, I use most of the time like this. And if I need, I sometimes prefer query selector also. But yeah, most of the times it's get element by ID. So you can use those things to select the element from the DOM. Okay, to interact with the DOM. And then, okay, you select the element. That is the first step you told. Now the next thing is I want to update the element, right? Now how to update the element? You will learn about query selector, right? I told you about query selector. Now, once you have selected an element, you can change the text, HTML attributes, and style. This is how JavaScript makes come alive. That means, let's say, I select the element, but what after that? I want to change its content, right? I want to trigger something, maybe it's changes CSS or something like that, right? So at first, let's say I select a text called greeting, and then el dot text content. So whatever you see inside a p tag or h1 tag, that is its text content. JavaScript can select that using text content. You can just write, let's say, hello Siliguri, and when you write that, it will update that content to hello Siliguri. Same way, let's say you want to update the HTML. Let's say inside a p tag, there is a strong tag. Strong means like what we have normal bold tag, right? So you have a strong tag and then you want to put a welcome text and the HTML element. You can directly insert that. Same way for styles also. Let's say you want to update a color, right? So you can update el.style.color. Same to crimson. Now, when you inspect that element, you see the color changes to crimson. For class also, like let's say you have a class, right? And then class, there are multiple classes, right? In the particular element, you can add or delete. So there is a variable called class list, and the class list you have add, remove, like that. So you can have add and then the active. If you inspect, you see that particular element, the greeting element, now going to have a class called active class. So this is how you change the content and styling for the element. Now event handling. Event handling is the next part that I talked about, right? Let's say I want to click a button and then fire a function, right? So function, we know how to write, but now how to trigger that function using a button click. Now this is how we can do. So in JavaScript, button events are very important thing. So how we fire events and different type of things. Now, events are the signals of browser signals the browser fires, clicks, key places, scrolls, attach listeners to elements to run code when those event happens. Now, what happens? So let's say I have a button. I have selected the button using query selector. Okay. Now, how to capture the click event? Now we have a function called add event listener. So button dot add event listener. Now, what event you want to capture from the button? Click event, right? So you write the name of the event and then you pass the callback function. Callback function means the second function without a name. So any function without a name is a callback function. So I pass a function and this E is basically the event. Like when we press the thing, it fires a event. Okay. And this event, you can write, let's say I want to write clicked and e dot target. Target basically gives us e dot target, like some of the properties of that particular button. So other common, like this is how we do here. Instead of console, you can fire any function. Let's say you have a theme change button. On click of that, you want to change the theme. You can just simply, let's say, same way how we change the styles, right? You want to like el dot class list dot add dark theme, right? Dark or light. You can trigger those. So it's like how you can like chain those all those things. Other common events are input event, submit event, key down, scroll, mouse over. Like when there's a types, you want to do something like that. You can do things like that, event handling. Now, this is a little bit of controversial and what I can say, difficult part, the asynchronous programming. Now, before doing that, I just want to know, anyone knows about what is asynchronous programming? Like maybe want to tell what is asynchronous in like any language? What is async? Anyone? Okay, I think no one's like everyone got like thought why we are like picking people. But yeah, like you can tell your own answer. Like anything is fine, right? I just want to see like if anyone a task that runs in the background without stopping the rest of the program. Great, great. Yep. Yeah, Anushka. Yeah. So the whole thing about this and why I tell it's controversial, people mock about it is the reason is every time I told at first that JavaScript is a synchronous single-threaded language. Now people will mock. Okay, you told like it's a synchronous language, then why you talk about asynchronous, right? And why asynchronous programming is going to happen? First of all, what is this asynchronous programming? Synchronous programming is step-by-step execution. Let's say first line इसके बाद like second line like that it will execute. For asynchronous programming, the problem is let's say um, I trigger something and it takes some time to execute. Right now, on those time we cannot freeze that application. Right now, those things in JavaScript also they handle its own way. Browser has some part which are going to help it to handle this asynchronous operation. So example is let's say JS run on a single thread, like there is a one single thread. Now what happen is JavaScript, whenever it founds anything which is asynchronous, it moves it into a next into a different part in the code in the browser. So async lets slow operation like network, timer, file hours happen in a background without freezing the UI. What it means is so think about it like a where JavaScript has a single thread, it executes line by line. Anytime it finds anything like set timeout, set interval, fetch operation like API call, or anything, or let's say write operation, file write operation, read operation, it moves them into a separate part of the memory. Uh, just want to tell a little bit. You can I'll prefer if you just read about them also. There is something called as macro task queue and micro task queue. So it stores those all those things into those two queues, and whenever they are executed, they again come back into the main thread and they start executing. That is how things work. So let's say here, think about it like this fetch sync and the URL. This is a simple, let's say, API call. Now the problem is if it's not a like asynchronous call, it will freeze the UI until this fetch operation is done. The whole page will get stuck, right? Now for asynchronous, what we are doing is we are telling, okay, first fetch the URL and whenever you get the value, then only render the page. Now in that case, what will happen is it will not freeze the whole application. So that is what asynchronous programming is all about. Now, this is the thing that you saw in set timeout and like the get element by ID also, like add event listener also. So callbacks. Callback is a function passed into another function to be called later. Classic async pattern, but nesting them quickly leads to a callback hell. What it means is, see, here I write set timeout, and inside that I write a no named function. And this is like I pass this function as a parameter for another function, and I know that it will execute later. It is called as a callback function. Same as like add event listener, we write right. At first, we have a click event and then comma, we pass a function. That is a callback function. Same, and what is callback hell? Callback hell means normally what happen is we write callbacks one after another. Say, see, we have a get user, and inside get user we write another callback which will take the user, and then we have a get post, and the get post we have another callback which will get comment, and this will create a like callback hell. We call it in JavaScript term. And there is another popular term you may heard in interview, that is a pyramid of doom. Okay, so it like that pyramid, like a pyramid structure. Not a like what I can say, not a vertical one, but more into a horizontal one. So that's why we it's better when you write things like this. You may feel okay at first, it's a great thing to write callbacks, but you need to make sure that you don't get into callback hell. Now, this after the callback hell, we have a concept which is called promise. Now, promise is basically a more cleaner way to handle this async. Okay, so you learn about the callback. Callbacks is a more like what I guess a complex way to handle asynchronous programming. Promises are much easier way. Okay, so promise represents a future value. It's pending, then resolves, fulfilled, or rejects, and chain them with dot then and dot catch to flatten the nested callback. What it means? So promise is actually a type which is in JavaScript. You can use them directly. So you can have new promise. And then uh, what it is, promise is, let's say, it's actually how in English we told promise, right? Normally, if you promise someone something, there can be only two scenarios. Either you like take that promise and you resolve it, or you don't resolve it like that, right? Same way, for any promise when you create, it can only have two values. Either you will resolve or reject. Okay. And until we get the value of the like it's resolved or reject, like we get that value, it's in pending state. Once it's done, it can be either two state, resolve or reject. What it means is we told that it's used for asynchronous programming. So until it goes into resolve or reject, it's in pending. Once it's done, you can have two state. Either resolve, that means fulfilled, or reject, or that means failed. So here see, like new promise, you have resolve and reject, and set timeout, you just want after 500 seconds, you want to resolve it. That means first it will be in pending state. After 500 milliseconds, it will be automatically go into success. And then what you write is a promise and then dot then, and whatever result, like that means this success, it will be in result, and you want to console log it. That means it will console log success, right? And dot catch means, so let's say instead of this resolve, you write reject and failed in the resolve reject. What will happen is instead of dot then, it will go into dot catch, and it will go into the error, and it will print the console error, and that error will be failed. Okay, it's like that. Now, but the problem with with promises, you can do things like that, but a more cleaner way than writing promises, async await. This is the what I can say last and the what I can say the hardest part of asynchronous programming is async await only. But it's like very easy to understand once you know how to handle that. So async code that reads like sync code. So if you see here, you will see a lot of function, right? One function chained with another function like that. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to see and understand. But if you see here, you don't see any other function, also only one single function, and inside that everything writes in linear, right? This is what called as async await. So async function return a promise. Inside them, await, pursue, pauses execution until that promise settles, giving you flat and readable async code. What it means is, first is the same thing that we write using promise, we can write that using async await as well. So give an example. See, the async and function load user data and the ID it will take. So it will take the ID. What is the meaning of the function? It will take the ID and then load the user data, fetch the data of that particular user. Now, anytime you write a async function, you need to remember you need to write a try catch block. Why? Because as I already said, right, promise can be resolved or get rejected. So if it got rejected, it will go into this catch block. And if it resolves, it will be in the try block. Now, what I want to do is const user is equal to await and get user. And inside the get user, I want to pass a ID. Now, the thing is, this get user always returns the promise. That's the thing. That is why I write a await. Means I want to find the user with that particular ID. Now, I found the, let's say, it will fetch the user and store the value of the user in this variable. Now, for this particular user, I want to fetch all of the social media posts for that particular user. So I want to fetch post is equal to await get post and use the user.id. Now, once I get the post, I want to return the user and post. So what is the who is the user? Let's say Debajit Mallick is the user, and these are the LinkedIn posts he posted, like that. And if let's say any of the get user or get posts get failed, it will go into this catch block and print the error. So this looks more cleaner, like rather than this or like this fallback, right? So that is the whole purpose of using async await. Now, a more actual example is using Fetch API. What is Fetch API? Normally, you build front-end applications, right, using JavaScript. Now, the problem is the data that we show in the front end are all static data, right? So, write HTML, CSS, that makes no sense at all. If you want to build an application like Netflix or Amazon Prime or any kind of application, which is an interactive application, which has a database and all those things, you need to have a integrated API, right? Now, here, it's why we use the Fetch. This Fetch is a browser API, which we can use to call the APIs, get the data, and show it into the browser. So let's say I have let's write that using async await. So async function get users, and we have a REST, we have await, and then fetch. So you can go you can go into browser and search for some sample APIs, they like mock API. So these are some of the mock APIs. You can just hit them. They will give you data, and you check that okay, if response dot is not okay, then you throw an error that okay, I get an error that I am not getting the user's data from the API. Otherwise, what you will do, you will just await base.json. Whatever response you get, you just convert it into JSON and you get the user's data and you return the user's data. So this is how we can use Fetch API. Simply, you just need to write await and then the fetch and then the URL. This is what you need to do to write a API call. Now, there are some of the best practices that I'm going to talk about. So up to that part that teach you, like this part, these are all about simple things in JavaScript, like okay, basic whatever things you need to do. But when you go into one level up, let's say that first part till now, what I teach you is like 0 to 1. Like okay, I don't know about anything JavaScript, and then I know about JavaScript. I can write JavaScript codes, and I know basic concept. But once you know that, the next part of becoming a production level developer is you need to learn about these things. Code quality is the first thing, that how write meaningful names, keep functions small, prefer const, avoid side effects. What it means is you have this behavior, right? When you write code in college, like write let A, let B, let C, like that. In production code, if you go into a code base, you didn't going to see this type of thing. It's always a explanatory thing. Let's say if a user, I write, let's say a object called user, I will write proper names that, okay, ID, name, age, address, like that. Everything should be, the function name should be self-explanatory, like find user by ID, find user by address, like that. Something should already explained that what it like. So let's say is even, is odd. So with the name, I understand that okay, it will be a like Boolean function, Boolean variable, right? Like that. So you need to write meaningful names. You need to write reusable function, reusable code. So you don't need to write redundant code. Let's say you have 2, 3 lines of code which you used a lot inside your whole code base. Make function out of them. Create maybe a file called utils and then there put a function. Let's say example, a simple example is in your application, you lot of places you write the full name of a user. And from API or whatever the place, you get only first name and last name. So what you normally do is you format them like first name and then a space and then a last name, like that. Why you write multiple times? Create a utils file, create a function that okay, format name or something like that. Format first name, last name, like that. And then there, take 2 parameters, first name and last name, and return first name, then space, and then the last name, like that. And all the time, when you want to write names, full name, just call that function, invoke that function. That is a much better way of writing code. So you need to learn them. But I am not forcing you guys to learn it at first. Maybe after you learn basic, you are able to write simple application, build simple application. Don't think about the code convention and stuffs at all. And then once you are going to able to do that, then think about how to write code quality and things like that. Then performance, that is another thing. Now, once you learn how to build application, 0 to 1 step, next step is how to build performance application. What I mean is, let's say you build a simple to do application. You see, okay, I can make a to do application, but let's say what will happen when my to do application is being used by, let's say, 1,000 users at the same time. You see, okay, there is a lag, right? Now, why this lag is going to happen? You need to find those performance bottlenecks, right? Avoid globals. Let's say, give a simple example. Let's say you build a feature where you type something in the to dos, and then it will filter the to dos. Let's say, right, something like that. Now you see, okay, but why it's working right now? But the next step should be why it's lagging, why it's slow, right? Once you understand, okay, the reason is it's because of the performance, right? How I'm handling that. You will learn about debounce and throttle, implement that, and you see it will be much faster, right? These are some of the things that you need to learn once you learn the basics performance, and then how use debugging tools. See, in web development, the 50% I think about it is about how you write code, and the 50% is how you use the tools. So in Chrome, if you inspect the page, right? You can just right click and you have a option called inspect, right? You need to learn about all the things in the dev tools, the like elements tab, the network tab, right? The source tab, those things, the performance tab. Once you able to use those things, it will be very easy for you to understand, okay, where the actual issue lies. Other than you are able to use those tools, it's very hard to understand, okay, what's the actual reason of the issue. So you see, that's the difference. Like normally, if you see any, let's say, fresher engineer, or let's say difference between a 2 3 year experienced engineer, the 2 3 year experienced engineer found the issue much earlier. It's not like that, okay, he write better code. It's all about that he has better debugging skill. He can found that, okay, what should be the root cause for that particular issue. So these are the three things why I kept it at the end. The whole reason is you don't need to learn it right now. Once you know JavaScript, once you know HTML, CSS, build some application at first. Don't think about performance debugging and at all code quality. Just build things. Once you able to build stuff, then think about these three parameters. And I feel then it will be more meaningful to you. Otherwise, from the day one, if you think about all these things, it will be very hard to build a simple application because you think too much about all those things. So this is all the summary of what we learned today. The core JavaScript, like variable, function closure, the DOM manipulation, right? The selecting, updating, and events. Then the async JavaScript, like promises, async, await, fetch, and then the best practices, like the quality, performance, and debugging. And that's it. I think if anyone have any questions, they can put in the chat, or let's unmute themselves. They can ask me. No issues at all right now. And
Cool.
if you want to connect with me, here are like my socials. You can just ping me there also. But right now, yeah, if you can ask me, you can ask me here.
Cool. Thank you so much, Debajit, for taking up this session. Guys, we can take few questions and then we will close it because we are little out of time. But yeah, please put your questions on the chat box and we can take those. Maybe 2 or 3 questions only we can take. Rest you can ask, connect to these platforms and ask Debajit about that. But yeah, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat box.
If you don't have any questions, that means there are two things. That one is you understand everything, and there is like you may like uh not understand anything. And like yeah, I know like it's very normal. Like for I know it's pretty overwhelming for someone to understand all this topic at once. But yeah, I think the thing that you need to think about is like, okay, take all the things and then whatever topics I just taught, just remember those. If you want, I will like maybe later share the slides also, and then you can also take that. Sorry, in React Native, it is really needful of using native wind or the style sheet is enough. See, for React Native, what I can say is it's not something like it's mandatory to use native wind. It's more about like how your company or prefers or whatever you find easy. See, style. It's like the question is like that okay, normal CSS. Can I build a whole application using normal CSS, or I need to have a material UI thing or not? It's simply on you. Okay. So if you want to have a very tight control on your application, style sheet is a good thing, right? But let's say normally what happens is people don't prefer those things a lot because you need to write a lot, right? And that is very tedious for us. So that's why they go into more things like native wind and other libraries as well. There are other libraries as well. You can prefer on different things also. That is also a, but yeah, it's up to you. At first, I tell prefer using style sheet, learn about it a little bit, and then maybe you build application using native one. Why does the promise callback run before set timeout, FN zero, beginner in jail? Why I put this question? Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'm not. Yeah. So why the promise callback runs before set timeout? The whole reason is you remember in the session I told about there are things, two things. One is a micro task queue and a macro task queue. This is the whole reason of it. So when you write a promise, right, and when you write a set timeout, these two, so this micro task queue and macro task queue. In micro task queue, all the priority operations. So I told right, all the things which are asynchronous operation goes into two part. Now JavaScript will see, okay, it will take the microtask queue and put all the, let's say, API calls and all those things, promise calls, into the microtask queue. And all the set timeout things that you see, it will put them into the macrotask queue. Now, in between both of two of them, the priority of microtask queue is always higher. That is the reason when you see that the code execution happens, if you have a API call and if you have a set timeout, always API call will be returned first because microtask queue has a higher priority, and after that macro task queue, that means set timeout will get preferred. That's why it's happening. In large scale, how do you decide when to optimize DOM manipulation versus relying on framework? How do we decide how to optimize DOM manipulation versus relying on framework? See, it doesn't depend on like DOM manipulation optimization, because normally if you see in large scale application right now, what happen is most of the companies, like 99% I can say, they go into framework part. The reason is we can build application using JavaScript, but the thing is it's little bit like you need to write a lot, right? And you need to handle a lot of things. So people prefer going through like React versus React, Vue, and Angular, Next.js. In front end, like every 6 months you go into a new framework. They are like emerging. But yeah, that choice of framework is fully based on the use case, right? Let's say now not more into the optimizing the DOM. It's about optimizing the use case. What I can say. So let's say if I have something like okay, I want an application which I want a very robust application. I have a very small team of developers, but I don't want them to write a lot of messier code. Uh, this is a little bit controversial, but Angular is a better choice because in Angular you cannot write a very bad code. They have strict convention rules, so you can write things good. They you don't even support JavaScript, so they support TypeScript. That's the reason. So it's things like that, like the use case which decides like which framework to pick and how to optimize that DOM there. Since AI can generate code, what should I focus on learning so I don't become dependent on it? Yeah. So at first, what I can say is uh, what I am telling you guys is at first right now when you are learning topics, use maybe ChatGPT, Claude, those tools to learn about the topics. Don't use them to write code. What I can say is like don't tell, let's say, to make that whole project, right? Let's say you want to build a e-commerce. Don't ask like ChatGPT or Claude to build a whole e-commerce application. What you can do with them is teach me, let's say, to build a e-commerce application. What are the topics I need to learn? And then it will give you a list of topics. Then learn about each topic in depth, and then let's say for each of the things that you learn from it, try to write it by yourself at first, because see, for senior developers, AI is very useful because they know how to, like, there was a popular thing, like very new thing that I learned recently. One of my, like, in my company, my manager told me this thing. It's great until you run AI, until AI runs you. So if, let's say, in our company we use things like Claude and stuff like that. So if you are running Claude, it's a great thing. But the problem is when Claude is basically running you, that means you don't know anything. Whatever it's saying you just say agree, 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 next, next. Then it's a very big problem. Now for senior engineers, it's not a problem because they already know how to write code. So before like this chat GPT Cloud comes up, for like last like 3 4 years, they are writing code by themselves. So they know how to write code properly. So these things are basically their helping hands. But for freshers, what I prefer them is use AI as a companion. But when you are in learning phase, let's say first basic of JavaScript, when you are learning those things, use ChatGPT Cloud to learn the concept, and but don't use them to like write the code. Okay, write it by yourself. Once you are good at it, you can write a whole to-do application by yourself. Then use it to maybe build large application like that. Yeah, I think we have that much questions. Yeah, I think I don't think we have any more question. Uh, yeah, Ankit, I think we are good to go if we don't have any other questions.
Cool. Thank you so much, Debajit, for taking this up. Cool, guys. Let's connect and let's talk more on that. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for this meeting. We'll connect in next meeting. I have another meeting, so I have to hop to another meeting. But yeah, thank